the second community meeting. We're going to allow a few extra minutes for people to join and we will get started soon. So hello everyone and welcome to the second community meeting for the Bus Network Redesign project. My name is Reagan Checchio and I will be serving as the moderator for tonight's meeting. I would like to remind everyone of the rules for participating in the meeting, as well as remind everyone that this meeting is being recorded. It is also being live streamed on the Boston Neighborhood Network. While we wish we were able to do this meeting in person, we're hoping that we have designed an online public meeting that will be interactive and provide an opportunity for us to have a conversation together. Before we can begin that conversation, I want to review a few technical aspects of the Zoom platform. Shana, can you go to the next slide? And the next slide again. We have an interpreter who is translating the meeting tonight into Spanish. If you require these services, please click the interpretation button on your screen, it's the globe icon, and select which language you wish to hear. At this moment, I will ask all English speakers to please select English as their chosen language. This will allow you to hear translated non-English comments during the Q&A. I would like to also introduce our interpreter, Emily Getchell. Emily will provide a welcome and instructions in Spanish. Thank you, Emily. Next slide. You can also view closed captions for tonight's meeting by clicking the closed captions feature and selecting from the options shown. Show subtitle will display a caption at the bottom of the screen. View full transcript will display the meeting's audio transcription in a window to the right. Next slide. All attendees will be muted during the presentation to prevent excessive background noise. If you are viewing this meeting on a computer, toggle to speaker view to see the presentation more prominently. If you are on a smartphone, you can swipe to change the views. You may also use the chat button to submit a typed question or comment at any point during the meeting. We will be monitoring the chat during the presentation, but do ask that you hold substantive comments and questions for the question and answer session that we will be having later in the meeting. If you have a technical problem, please share your issues in the chat feature at any point during the meeting, and we will respond as quickly as possible. I will note that myself and Amanda and Shayna are going to have project team listed next to our names, and we will be available to assist you tonight. A reminder to everyone that the chat is visible to all, and we encourage you to keep your comments in the chat respectful to other attendees. And now, without further ado, I would like to introduce Caroline Van Ness from MassDOT, who will begin the main presentation. Caroline?
Thank you, Reagan. Next slide. So good evening, everyone, and thanks for joining us for the second Bus Network Redesign public meeting. I was saying the last time we did this, I think it was really hot and we had like a heat spell, and now we have this windy weather. So I hope everyone's keeping warm tonight. Oh, sorry, Sheena. Yep, great. So just before we get started, I'm really excited to present alongside tonight my colleagues, Melissa DeLay, Senior Director of Service Planning, and Christoph Spieler, who is an advisor to this project and other Better Bus Project initiatives. As Reagan said, I am Caroline Van Ness, and I am the project manager for the Bus Network Redesign. Before we get started, here is an agenda or an overview of what we'll be talking about tonight. So I will do a quick project overview. Then we're going to talk about elements that make bus service great, talk through how you need to kind of like adapt to different changes and think through different trade-offs to create a great bus network. And then I'll spend a little bit of time on the project timeline. And then, as Reagan said, at the end, we will have time for Q&A. Next slide. Sorry, next slide again. Great. So before I even talk about what the Bus Network Redesign is, I wanted to say that there's many people, departments, and initiatives working to make the bus better at the T, and Network Redesign is just one of those initiatives. There are things like the bus transit priority, one of which you can see, I believe, this weekend on Columbus Ave, the first center running in the region. Super exciting to get our buses out of traffic, make them faster, more reliable. There are initiatives to improve our bus stops and improve accessibility and amenities at our bus stops, modernizing fleet and facilities, improving passenger information and bus operations. Slide. But Bus Network Redesign is really focused on service and how we can really reimagine how the bus network can better reflect the travel needs of the region and create a better experience for current and future bus riders by really changing service to adapt to those needs. Next slide. And when we say Bus Network Redesign, what we're talking about is really a network that generally serves the same neighborhoods and streets, but connects them in different ways and really improve connections to make a network that's better for riders. Next slide. So I want to talk a bit about our commitments and kind of our guiding principles for this project. So first and foremost, equity is a really big kind of driver for this project, creating a more equitable network. And when I say equity, I specifically mean improving access to opportunities and quality of service for our transit critical populations. And those are low income populations, people of color, seniors, people with disabilities, or people who live in households with few or no vehicles. We're also talking about truly transformational change. So not just small changes or tweaks to different routes, but really looking at the network as a whole and seeing how it can really be better for our riders. And that leads to the next point, is really focusing on creating a better network for people who ride today. We've seen throughout the pandemic, that bus has continued to have high ridership compared to their modes, and we really want to make a network better for our riders. We're also committed to extensive stakeholder engagement. So we're actually just getting off of doing I think about 35 hours of street team outreach at different stops and stations, many of which some of the staff helped us do, including Michaela, who's helped to run this meeting tonight. And it was really great to get back out there and talk to riders again. So thank you to those who engaged with us and had conversations, and we're looking forward to continuing to do that type of outreach throughout this project. We're also talking about implementation in the near term. So this is not like a long range planning process. This is a process that is really focused on how can make this a feasible plan that could get started in 2022 in phases over 3 to 5 years. And I'll talk about that in a minute. And then finally, we want to integrate service changes with bus priority and other infrastructure improvements to really maximize the benefits to our riders. Next slide. So we're not just restoring, but we're transforming. So we believe that going back to the pre-COVID network is not good enough, and we want to build a better and more equitable network than what we had pre-COVID. And we also see how essential transit has been to the region's economic recovery. And while the redesign is based on pre-COVID service hours, we believe that this process also shows where we can add more service when we have the resources. Ultimately, again, the network should really change to reflect the change that we're seeing in the region today. Next slide. And when I say we're redesigning the entire network, I really mean it. So we're starting kind of as with a blank slate here, and really wanting to have both a data-driven and people-driven process. And so, we've done a lot of extensive outreach, starting with when we kicked off the Better Bus project in 2019, hearing from a lot of riders, and I'll talk about some of the things we've heard more. And that also involves, close coordination with our municipal and agency partners to really create a shared vision for the region. There's many planning processes going on throughout the region today, and we want to, incorporate that and really coalesce around one vision for how the bus network can serve the needs of the region together. We also want to understand the trips people are taking. And this is part of the data-driven approach. So not just understanding the 9 to 5 kind of commute trips, and not even just understanding our current ridership patterns, but also understanding how all people in the region are traveling and all different trip types to really create a better bus network. Next slide. So now I'm going to turn to talking to really what are the elements of great bus service. Next slide. So as I mentioned, we've really done a lot of outreach, and we've heard from our riders kind of several key things that make bus service great. So it goes where people want to travel, where they need it. It is simple to use and understand. It's fast, frequent, and reliable, and it serves the people who need it most. Next slide. So on this first point of going where people want to travel, we've been using this new location-based systems data set, which I'll talk about in the next slide. And we also actually did a survey to supplement that data set to really identify kind of new or underserved regional destinations that we should be looking at for better bus service. And as you can see, I won't talk through the entire list here, but you can see that there's a lot of non-downtown locations that really rise to the top, including places like the Longwood medical area, which, we're working closely with the city of Boston and Masco to really understand how we can better that area in particular, as it's seen a lot of growth. Next slide. So to identify some of these regional destinations, we've been using this new location-based service data, essentially cell phone data about where people actually, even if they're not currently taking the T. So this data actually looks at all modes. So whether you're walking, biking, or driving, or taking transit, and it represents all different trip types. So not just work types, but also social, medical, childcare, grocery trips, all sorts of trip types. And then it's anonymized and unlinked from cell phone numbers to preserve privacy. We also, as I mentioned, recently completed a survey this past summer that was focused on kind of helping to supplement this data set. Next slide. Great bus service is also fast, frequent, and reliable. And I like this quote here from when we did outreach in 2019. It's very common sense, but if you expand bus service and you make it more frequent, more people will use it. And just to underscore that point, in our survey, we asked kind of what you most want to see improved about MBTA services near you. And the top 3 things that people said were frequency, travel time, and reliability. Next slide. Great bus service is also simple to use and understand. I always use the example, if someone was visiting from out of town, you easily be able to direct them how to use the bus network. I think in some places maybe yes, and in some places no, and that's something that we want to be looking at through this process. Next slide. Great bus service also serves the people who need it most. So I talked about this a little bit earlier, but throughout the pandemic, bus ridership was more reliable than any other mode, retaining up to 4 times more of its riders than commuter rail or ferry. And ridership during the pandemic has been, or really was, less focused on traditional peak times and 8 a.m. and 5 p.m. on weekdays, and more focused on off-peak travel. And we really think, this is something we saw before the pandemic, but it really has underscored the need to do this type of project and develop a new network that better serves all trip types throughout the day. Next slide. And when we're talking about serving the people who need it the most, we go back to kind of the critical populations I talked about earlier. So low income populations, people of color, seniors, and people with disabilities who are more likely to ride and rely on transit, make multiple trips while riding transit, and use transit throughout the day, as well as travel to non-downtown destinations. Next slide. And just again, to kind of underscore this point, something that's been really great is using this LBS data to really identify trips and better understand trips made by low-income residents and people of color, even if they aren't just making kind of their trips kind of to and from home and to work, but really understanding different trips. And this data set has really allowed us to prioritize trips made by these groups when we're thinking about how to allocate resources and design new bus service. Next slide. So taking all of this together, we've been working on a framework for how we want to evaluate service and really understand what makes service competitive relative to driving. And so we're looking at 4 factors: walk distance, transfers, travel time, and frequency. And when we say competitive relative to driving, that doesn't mean you need to own a car, but that can be competitive relative to if you take a Lyft, Uber, or taxi. Next slide. And just in terms of how we're actually utilizing those 4 factors, we really want to answer 3 key questions. And one is the MBTA providing transit critical populations with equitable transit service? Is the MBTA actually connecting people to the places they need and want to go? And is the MBTA a good option for getting people to these places and making these trips? Next slide. So great bus service does so many things, but there are only limited resources available to actually operate buses. And I'll now actually pass it off to my colleague, Melissa DeLay, to talk about that.
And I'm actually going to jump in, Caroline, this is Reagan again, right before Melissa speaks, to invite, a lot of people have joined the meeting since we did our introductory remarks, and I would just welcome any elected officials or municipal staff that are in attendance to, if they want to share their name and affiliation in the chat. Now it might be a great time to do so. So apologies, Melissa, I will now turn it back to you.
Thanks, Reagan, and thanks, Caroline. Next slide, please. So let me talk about what we're looking for when we're saying change for a better bus system. Next slide, please. I want to prepare people that making the network better will require change. So service will be focused where there's a lot of demand for travel and where transit critical populations travel. That includes, as Caroline mentioned, people of color, low-income populations, low or no car ownership households. There also may be fewer stops along some routes. We've talked previously that kind of our legacy stop spacing was to have maybe a stop every, 4 or 5 or 600 feet, which means that it can often take a very long time to get anywhere. But as we are looking at refining our network, we're looking at having more state of the practice stop spacings of around a quarter mile, more or less, which can make for more reasonable travel times for those longer trips. We're also looking to make bus routes straighter and more direct. We're looking to simplify routes so that they can run the same way all day and try to get away from some of our practices of having a different route that operates during peak periods or a different route that operates on Saturdays only. Or it can be very complicated to look at some of our schedule cards when we have different service patterns that are operating different times of day. We also want to align our schedules better with all-day demand so that people can really rely on transit, not just for those peak period work commute trips, but for the whole variety of trips that people are making over the course of a week. Some areas may see new types of service. That could mean some places that have peak-only service, for example, might go to have an all-day, 7-day service, or even some places that have, say, a 40-foot transit bus might see some different type of bus, if maybe a smaller bus for some of those more neighborhood circulator type services. So we want to kind of expand the types of different services that are provided. There also may be fewer routes on some streets. For example, there are some streets where we might have 2 or 3 different routes, each of which is not particularly frequent. And I think that the riding public would be better served if perhaps those resources were consolidated into making one really high quality route. And perhaps that means that might require a transfer for some different destinations. And then also some passengers may need to transfer to another bus or to the rail system. For example, there might be some one-seat rides where people can have a direct trip today on a bus that perhaps in the future network might involve a transfer to another bus or to the subway. Or also it could be that somebody is making a transfer at a current subway station today, and in the future that transfer might happen at a different location. So I just want to kind of prepare people that these are the types of changes you can expect to see in a bus network redesign. Next slide. Also, as part of a bus network redesign, we're really focusing on creating more high frequency corridors. Those are places that have high quality, frequent service and improved infrastructure, which we think can really make for a better passenger experience. On the service side, that would make for more corridors that have service 7 days a week with frequency that's all day, every 10 or 15 minutes or better for most of the day, perhaps a little less frequent on late nights or late on weekends, for example. But something that people could walk up to just as they ride the rapid transit network without really even ever needing to consult the schedule. Similarly, there would be a minimum span of service from early in the morning to after midnight, and that would really provide that minimum span of service. We're also looking to have extensive infrastructure with bus priority, whether that is dedicated bus lanes or center running bus lanes like our Columbus Ave BRT that's going to be opening up very shortly, or other types of bus priority treatments, whether that's signalization changes or other bus stop amenities, talking about the experience at the bus stops with shelters and signage and arrival information so that customers can really just have that better experience. And then lastly, we want to kind of focus these high frequency corridors and give better passenger information So we want to be clear that this is a different type of service, whether it's through the route nomenclature or how we communicate these on maps. We want to make it clear to passengers that this is sort of rapid transit-like in its frequency and in the level of amenities, and that people can have that higher expectation. So on the next map, on the next slide, sorry, we have a map that shows not quite, this isn't exactly the same as what Bus Network Redesign is talking about with high frequency corridors. This is a map of today's key bus routes, which are our busiest bus routes that have that high frequency. I would argue that perhaps the priority treatments that we have here aren't necessarily what we have envisioned for Bus Network Redesign, but the frequency of the service is very similar in terms of having 7-day-a-week service for the, from early in the morning until well past midnight. And I think you can see, looking at this map very quickly, that there's some gaps in the map that we really want to address through Bus Network Redesign. You can see there's nothing in Everett at all, nothing in Medford and Malden, Somerville, nothing to Lynn, nothing to Kendall Square, nothing in South Boston. South Boston waterfront has been a real emerging destination. This shows, we have 2 high frequency key bus routes in the Longwood Medical area, but for the amount of employment travel to Longwood Medical area, we think that the bus network could really do a lot more. So we don't have the future map yet, but I wanted to just kind of give a sneak preview of the type of things that we really want to emphasize as we're drawing what a new high frequency map could look like. But with that in mind, on the next slide, we can get into some of the other trade-offs. There's a limit to how much service the MBTA can provide because of resource limitations, and the resources can mean a number of different things. For one, it can be money. We have so much money to pay for operations, which can constrain how much we can do. We have so many buses. We do have a fleet and facilities plan on the horizon, but changes to that take time and resources. And that's another constraint on the number of peak services that we can provide. We have only so much maintenance capacity in our garages, which controls the number of buses that the MBTA can have. And we have only so many bus drivers. Now, again, we can hire new drivers, but that process takes time and resources. So these are the 4 different constraints that we're operating in as we're determining what can be done on various time horizons, either in the immediate future or over several years. And we're looking both at what we can do within those existing resources, and also we're looking to identify, what will we do if we're able to identify extra resources that could be used to improve service most effectively. And I'll also add, those resources, we don't necessarily need all 4 of those at the same time. For example, if we were able to get, additional funding and additional operators, perhaps that means we can do some of the changes during the off-peak, whether it's, evening service or midday service or weekend service, whereas some of the other changes like peak service, those are the things that are really found by the bus fleet and the maintenance capacity with, garages and those limitations. On the next slide, we can also see that there are other kind of limits to how we can run service and build our network. In this map shows Boston's street grid, which is, or I can't quite call it a grid, and compares that to Seattle and New York, which have far more regular spaced grids. And when you have river crossings and harbor crossings and sort of these curvilinear road networks, it can it just constrains where you can operate buses, what the shape of your network is. So that's just kind of the ground ground on which we're building our network. So on the next slide, we can also see different types of limitations. Our curb space. I know lots of people want to go to the same places at the same time every day, but there are limits to the number of bus routes that can end at the same place. And the reason for that is because it's important to have layover space at the end of every route. That serves a very important function, both for in terms of having a few minutes for the bus to recover time and help us to support a reliable schedule. It's also, in many cases, the only chance the bus driver has to use a restroom, which is an important part of being able to operate a reliable, high quality service, is having something that works for our employees as well. There are often kind of limited places to lay over in some of these very congested, crowded areas like downtown, Long Medical area, Harvard Square, Kenmore Square. There's a number of areas where we have very acute layover needs. So we want to make sure that having more space for bus layovers will allow us to provide more service where people want to go. Next slide. Another constraint on our ability to provide service is roadway congestion. When buses sit in traffic, it takes longer to run those routes. And it means that we're not getting as much value from that bus and that operator as another, that same bus and operator operating through a dedicated bus lane or a place with other high quality bus priority treatments, where those resources can really be more impactful and provide better frequency, faster trip times for people. So we want to make the best, most effective use of our resources by making sure that those buses aren't just stuck in traffic, not serving the public, but that they're able to move and get people where they need to go faster and more reliably. Next slide. This slide is showing the impact of what congestion costs the network, just as a kind of a sort of simple illustration. So for example, if you imagine you had one bus route with every 10-minute service, so this is very similar to one of our existing key bus routes. If it took 30 minutes to do that round trip, imagine that takes about 3 buses at peak, and that would be $6 million. But if congestion was gradually getting worse every year, which when I started here in 2000, so 20 years ago, was definitely the case of as the region grows, roadways become more congested, and those travel times just slowly increase every year. Over time, if that 30-minute round trip all of a sudden became 45 minutes round trip or 60 minutes round trip, you can see that that's costing millions of dollars more to operate that one route. And then multiply that by all the number of routes that we have in our system, and you can see that we would be spending many millions of dollars for not necessarily improved service, but just spending more money so that the buses could get stuck in traffic. So that's what we don't want to do. On the next slide, please. What we want to do is be able to address many of these limitations through partnerships with our municipalities. So for example, instead of spending more money so that we can get stuck and sit in congestion, this is showing an example in Chelsea of one of the bus priority lanes that they recently installed. If we can allow the buses to kind of move freely past the congestion, that can help us kind of maintain high quality service and kind of get back some of the lost time that's accrued over many years of worsening congestion. But also there's other partnerships. We can work with municipalities to identify those layover spaces so that we can have the capacity to terminate routes in places where people want to go, and all sorts of other partnerships with our municipalities. So with that, I will pass the baton to Christoph Spieler to continue.
Thank you. And let's go to the next slide. So Melissa just talked through some of the limitations, and some of those limitations are short term. The fleet can be increased over time, but right now it is a limitation. Some of those limitations can be solved through things like building new bus garages. Some of those limitations can be solved through things like bus infrastructure. But the reality of designing a bus network is we are always going to have to confront trade-offs, and that is in the basic nature of transit. If a bus is going down the street, there are multiple people on that bus, and those people have different goals. There may be somebody on that bus who this isn't their neighborhood. They're riding through, they're on the way to somewhere else, and they're kind of annoyed every time the bus stops since they want to get home. But there's somebody else on that bus who is going to this neighborhood, and they wish the bus had more stops so they had a shorter walk to their apartment. There are people who want to get home as quickly as possible, and they may be willing to walk a little further to their destination, but they not want a nice straight bus route. But on that same bus, there may be somebody who just had surgery, has difficulty walking, and really wants the bus to stop at the front door of their destination. When we're designing a network, we are always balancing the needs of everybody on that bus. Next slide. And if you think about the current network, we may take that network for granted, but that network already embodies a whole series of trade-offs. And sometimes those trade-off decisions may have been made 100 years ago, but the network is full of routes that do some things well and don't do other things as well, because that is the basic nature of transit. And what we are doing with this project is trying to actually take a deliberate approach to that, saying there are decisions built into the network, and we actually want to think about those decisions. So what we want to do today is talk you through some of those. Next slide. There are trade-offs we're not making. One of the things we're really clear on, for example, is the goal of this project is not to shrink the footprint of bus service. You could indeed outline a trade-off of saying we can serve more area, and that means the routes covering that area will be lower frequency, or we can serve a smaller area, and given the same number of buses and operators, we're going to be able to offer higher frequency. But we are planning to maintain the overall network coverage. The neighborhoods we serve today, the cities we serve today, will still have service within walking distance. Next slide. But there are a range of trade-offs we will be looking at in coming up with a draft map for this new network. And our goal today is to walk you through some of those, to actually get your responses on some of them, as we have already talked to many riders about trade-offs like these. But to really give a preview of the kind of decisions that are going to be embodied in this map. And the ones we're going to talk about today is route and stop spacing, deviations, simplicity, transfers, the bus-rail relationship, express service, downtown focus, and peak focus. And as we go through these, we're going to give you a chance to weigh in, and we're obviously looking forward to your questions about these afterwards. Next slide. And as we think about these, we really need to think about the fact that these buses are full of riders with very different needs. We need to think about how does this affect seniors? We need to think about how this affects people with disabilities, how this affects students, how it affects low-income residents. What's good for 9-to-5 office workers may be different than what's good for what we're now calling essential workers, people who are working service jobs, people who are working shifts, who may be going to work on the weekend or in the evening. And what works well for people who are already riding the system or ride the same bus at the same time every day may not work the same way for new riders or for people who make different trips every day. And that, again, is in the nature of design. So we're trying to do a system that serves a lot of people with a lot of different needs. And in doing that, we have to make decisions. Next slide. So the first trade-off we'll consider is this one, route stop spacing. We can put routes closer together. We can say we want everybody to be within a 5-minute walk of bus service, or we can put them further apart and say you may need to walk further. And at first glance, walking further may sound like it's not a positive, but what that means is if we have fewer routes, we can put more buses on every one of those routes. So you may need to walk a little bit further, but when you get there, your wait for the bus will be much less. We also have a trade-off around stop spacing. The closer the stops are together, the slower that bus service will be. And again, because it's slower, that also means it will be less frequent. Or if we take the stops further apart, you may need to walk a little further, but that service, once you get on, will be faster and more frequent. Next slide. We are already seeing this kind of trade-off embodied in the network. You can see neighborhoods like on Warren, Humboldt, Washington, and Center, where there's routes only a quarter mile apart. That's a 5-minute walk from one route to another means you're at max a 3-minute walk away from the nearest route. But then if you go further west out on the green line, you see cases where the nearest parallel routes are 3/4 of a mile apart and people walk further to transit. Next slide. So we'd like to hear from you, and let's go ahead and launch this poll now. What is your preference? Less frequent and slower service within a 5-minute walk, or more frequent and faster service within a 10-minute walk? And give everybody a chance to vote on this. It's fun watching the results come in here. A little moment more. I see there's some people still voting. Okay, and let's go ahead and close this poll and see the results here. Looks like we have about 80% of people saying we should be leaning towards more frequent and faster service, even if people need to walk a little further. Okay, next trade-off and next slide. Deviations. We can design routes to go to the front door of destinations. There may be a senior center, there may be a high school, there may be an apartment complex, and we can design that route to go down a side street and stop at that front door. Or we can design routes to be straighter so that they stay on major streets. They're still within walking distance of those destinations, but they don't stop right at the front door. So if you're going to that destination, you'll need to walk a little further, but everybody else on that bus is getting a straighter and more direct route. Next slide. You can see routes like this, that, for example, on the Route 8, you can see the deviation it takes to LMA. You can see the deviation it takes to Boston Medical Center, South Bay Center, only some of the time. All of those destinations are within 1/3 of a mile of if this route just went straight. But in every case, that route is going out of the way and going slower so that the people going to those destinations get that kind of convenient drop-off. On other parts of the network, we don't see that. MIT, for example, has 2 bus routes going by it, but neither of those goes to the Charles River side, which is 1/3 of a mile away from the nearest bus route. So the system doesn't have a deviation designed in to serve people who are going there. I'll say deviations always make sense for really high ridership destinations. That, for example, if we are passing a rapid transit station, it can make a lot of sense to go into that busway simply because so many people are riding it. But what we're talking about here is a range of different destinations, some of which are not particularly high ridership. Next slide. So tell us what you prefer. Do you prefer 2A, routes that go to the front door, or 2B, routes that stay on major streets within walking distance of the destinations? Actually interesting how steady these results are staying so far as multiple people answer. Give it a moment more and we'll close the poll in a moment. Okay, let's go ahead and close that poll and show the results. About 70% voting for the straighter routes, and about 30% voting for the deviations. I'll note you can mix these two on a network too, and you may decide that some routes make sense to deviate and some routes make sense to keep more straight. Next slide. We also have a choice of simplicity. One of the things you see a lot on the network today is routes which are optimized for very specific demands and very specific trip patterns, which means the routes look different at different times of the day. The first trip of the day may go to a different rapid transit station than every other trip in order to connect to the first train. The peak route may extend further to give some more people one-seat rides, and then the midday pattern is a third pattern. So one way to design a system is to have a lot of variation within a given route to serve the different needs at different times of day. Another way to design a system is to say, we're trying to make this easy to understand. So the route should function the same way every day of the week, every time of the day. Next slide. And we have a lot of variation in the system. If you look at the 6276 patterns, those were actually set up so that the weekend and Saturday service patterns were completely different and there was no Sunday service at all. So depending what day of the week you were riding, you actually had to know a completely different route. But we also have some routes on the system that are very straightforward. Route 57, 7-day-a-week service, no variance at all. It's the same route all day, every day. Every bus goes to the same spot. Next slide. So what do you prefer? And let's launch this poll. Do you prefer routes that are optimized for specific demand and vary over the course of the day or a week? Or do you prefer routes that are easy to understand and function the same way all the time? A little bit of time for people to answer here. Okay, let's go ahead and close the poll. So 62% in favor of routes that are easy to understand, 38% in favor of optimizing for specific demand. And obviously you can feel free to share your comments in the chat as to why you voted the way you did. Next slide. The next trade-off we want to talk about is transfers. We could design a network to really be optimized for one-seat rides so that as many people as possible do not need to transfer buses on the way to their final destination. Or we could design a network that is set up for transfers, and in doing that, we have fewer routes, and because we have fewer routes, every one of those routes can run more frequently. So you may need to change buses, but as a result of that, your bus actually comes more often. And depending on when you're leaving, you may actually end up arriving at your destination sooner because of that frequency. So two different philosophies for designing a network. Next slide. And again, this is something we see in the system. If you look at Everett, there's direct service from Broadway onto Wellington, from Main Street onto Wellington, from Broadway to Sullivan, and from Main to Sullivan. It's basically every choice of destinations you have a different route for, but none of those routes are frequent. Like we saw earlier, that's a hole in the key bus route map because none of those routes run every 15 minutes or better. As opposed to Route 1, where there is only one bus on Mass Ave, and there's a lot of major destinations you might want to get to, like Back Bay or Kendall or LMA, which do require a transfer if you're taking that bus. Next slide. So let's launch this poll. Do you prefer many routes to provide one-seat rides to many destinations, even those routes will be less frequent? Or do you prefer fewer routes with frequent service that are set up so that you transfer from one to the other? Give it a little moment more. See a few more results trickling in. Yeah, and let's go ahead and close that. So we had 61% voting for fewer, more frequent routes and 39% voting for less frequent routes that offer one-seat rides to many destinations. Again, I think this is the kind of thing where it depends on what your needs are as a rider. Your answer may be very different. Next slide. We also are looking at the bus-rail relationship. The Bus Network in Boston, the rapid transit network, has always been integrated. But there's different ways to bring bus and rail networks together. One option might be for bus networks that overlap rail and create one-seat rides. Or we could design a bus network that feeds into rail stations and that serves crosstown trips while the rail lines serve the radial trips into downtown. We've got both examples on the network today. Next slide. On the left, Route 39, for example, duplicates the green line for over half of the length of the route. That means that people coming from the southern end of the route from Forest Hills are able to have a one-seat ride to Back Bay, but it also means we're running a frequent bus alongside a frequent green line train. Or you can see other kinds of patterns. At Sullivan, for example, the bus routes all feed into the rail and none of them duplicate the orange line going into downtown. And that actually creates a lot of crosstown connections in that area. Next slide. So which do you prefer? Let's launch this poll. Bus that overlaps rail and creates one-seat rides, or bus that feeds into rail and sets up crosstown trips? Little more time for everyone to answer. And let's go ahead and close out that poll. 85% for bus feeding into rail and serving crosstown trips, which is actually the predominant pattern of the current network. 15% advocating for bus routes that overlap rail to create one-seat rides. And with that, next slide. Express service. Do we offer peak-only express service that creates a one-seat ride to a major destination, or do we use those same number of service hours to create a frequent bus route that feeds you into a rail station, which means you have to take a transfer, but it also means the service looks the same all day, and because we're using the same amount of resources, that bus route can be more frequent to get you to that transfer. Next slide. I'll note that there are places on the network where we offer that kind of express service. If you go from West Medford, for example, you have a choice of feeder service to the Orange Line with a 30-minute trip, or express service to Haymarket, where trip length varies from between 29 and 48 minutes, depending on how your connection works. And there are definitely people taking that express service because it offers that one-seat ride, even if it isn't faster. There's other parts of the network that have feeder service only. If you're coming in down in Quincy, for example, there's no express routes. Everything feeds into the rail line. Next slide. So which do we prefer? Peak-only express service with a one-seat ride, even if it means the local connecting route is less frequent, or do we prefer frequent all-day service that requires a transfer? Votes coming in frantically. Give a little more time for people to answer here. Okay, and let's go ahead and close that poll. We have 64% of people voting for frequent all-day service requiring a transfer, and 36% voting for peak-only express service offering a one-seat ride. And with that, next slide. Downtown focus. We could design a network that is really a radial network focused on downtown, where nearly every route is either taking you downtown or feeding you into a rail line that takes you downtown. Or we could design a network that has service to multiple centers. Next slide. You can see some examples here of what kind of connections you have there. Lechmere, for example, all of the routes are radial. Everything is focused on getting you to the green line to get you into downtown. If you're at Central, though, you see a wide range of routes. You can take the Red Line to downtown, but you also have bus service that takes you to Back Bay, LMA, Boston Medical. If you look at Boston today, we have a lot of different employment centers. We have a lot of different hospitals. We have a lot of different universities, all of which are major destinations. So next slide. Let's launch this poll. Do you prefer a system that really focuses on getting people downtown, or do you prefer a system that tries to serve all of the multiple centers we have? A little more time for people to vote here. Okay, I think we can close out this poll. This is by far the most lopsided result we've seen so far. 90% of people voting for service to multiple centers, which I think reflects the degree which the land use pattern of Boston has changed since this network was originally designed. Next slide. Peak focus. Do we want very frequent service during the 9 to 5 rush hours with less frequent service off peak? Or do we want a sort of moderate frequency all day? Do we want to really concentrate our resources for rush hour? Or do we want to spread them out for all sorts of trips, including people who don't work 9 to 5 jobs, as well as all of those non-work trips? Next slide. Again, you can see some real variations in the system. Route 86 was one of the higher ridership routes in the network pre-COVID. Trips every 10 minutes at peak, but in the middle of the day, some of those trips were up to 40 minutes apart. That's actually fairly typical of today's network, but there are some routes for Route 43, 19 hours of service a day, ranging from 25 to 45 minutes all day long. Next slide. So which do you prefer? Peaky service with much more frequent rush hour service, but less frequent off-peak service, or do you prefer moderate frequency all day? Okay, let's go ahead and close out this poll. We've got 69% for all day frequency and 31% for focusing service in the peak. Next slide. So when you see a map next year, you will see that we applied these trade-offs in different ways all across the network. And fundamentally, when we show you a map, we are not just asking you the details about individual routes. We are asking your feedback on, did we get this right? Did we draw a map that really reflects the right approaches to these trade-offs? And we really appreciate all of your input today. I see a lot of people have been in the chat. It's really interesting to see the different range of results to these different questions. And hopefully this will help you understand that draft map when we release it next year. Next slide. So overall, this is about changing for a better bus system. This system will change, but these changes will result in a better network. We're trying to say for most current riders, we should have more faster, more direct, and more reliable service. For some non-riders, it should be easier to understand the system and make it easier for them to become bus riders. For transit critical populations, we are focusing on providing more frequent and more convenient service. But this does mean that a lot of current riders will need to adjust to change. And we understand that that's hard, that even if your trip is getting better, simply having to adjust to a new network will be real work. And our commitment is we're doing this only because we think we can actually improve the network for a lot of people. Next slide. And we're designing a network that is designed to grow and expand with additional resources. We know we have limitations on how much service we can run today, but if we invest more resources in the system, we can reduce those limitations and run a bigger bus network in the future. We are trying to design a system that can expand and grow into the future. And we are also creating analysis tools that will allow the system to continue to adjust and allow us, as new development happens, as trip patterns change, to decide where to put more service. Next slide. So let's talk about what's coming next, and I'll pass it back to Caroline.
Great, thanks, Christoph. So next slide, and I'm going to try to get through these through this pretty quickly, but feel free to ask questions in the Q&A. Want to make sure we have time to go through that. So just in terms of project timeline, as I mentioned, we conducted a survey over the summer that was really about, are we getting people to the places they need and want to go, and is transit a good option to get us there? We also, just as I mentioned, completed street team outreach, and now we're working towards creating a draft network map where we will be doing very extensive public outreach in winter and spring of 2022. Based on that feedback that we get on the draft bus network map, we will revise the map and then bring kind of a final network map to the board for approval. Once we have that approved, then we will do more outreach, actually like having to do with implementation once we actually get into implementing the new bus network. And as I mentioned, that will start as early as the fall of 2022, but in phases. I also just wanted to mention, related to this, that there is a winter 2021 service change meeting that has yet to be scheduled, but it will be sometime in November, just for folks who have questions about scheduled changes that are coming up in the nearer term. Next slide, please. So just in terms of implementation, I wanted to just again reiterate, we're talking about kind of 3 to 5 phases of implementation that will potentially be rolled out by geography, and implementation timing will depend on structure of the new network, staff and public outreach, and especially the ability to implement bus priority, is that'll really critical to actually provide the service levels that we're talking about. So with that, I'll turn it to you, Reagan, to begin the Q&A portion.
Thank you, Caroline. Next slide, Shana. So first, I'm going to say the chat has been very active. So I want to thank you all with your engagement with this material tonight. We are going to review all the chat comments. I know there was also some contextualizing about the poll responses, and some people actually who had difficulty voting in the poll were voting via the chat. So we will be taking all of that into account. I will ask you actually at the moment to actually lower your hands. I'll go through the process for Q&A. Let me first just go through how it will work, and then I'm going to call on elected officials first, and then we'll move to Q&A. So if you do want to share a comment or ask a question, you can continue to use the chat feature on the screen to submit your typed question or comment. We're going to alternate between reading questions and comments already submitted and recognizing those who want to pose a question verbally. I think probably in the interest of time, there have been a lot of comments tonight, so I might not read every comment. We'll focus more on the questions that are going to be asked. But again, I'll reiterate, we're saving the chat, we're reading all the comments. I will ask you, if you're asking a question verbally, to please be brief so we can hear from as many people as possible. So if you do wish to share a comment or question verbally, when it is time, you can press the raise hand button. For those of you who are joining by phone, you can raise your hand by pressing the star and then the number 9, so *9. For attendees who speak Spanish tonight, please raise your hand to provide your comments and questions verbally for the interpreters to hear, and repeat your comments. And I'll remind everyone again to switch to the appropriate language channel so you can hear the appropriate language. For those offering verbal comments, when we recognize your name, you're going to be unmuted and you may speak. After you share your comment, we'll lower your hand and then you'll be returned to the muted state. Before we open the comment and question segment to the public, we would like to invite any elected officials in attendance or their staff to ask questions or make comments. You can use the raised hand feature so we can recognize and unmute you. Okay, I see Ramey Parker from Stoneham. You should be able to speak now.
Hi, thank you very much. At the last Better Bus Network meeting, we did submit a letter via Stack to Caroline. I'm not sure if you got that, but I just wanted to know, is there a better way for us to reach out and give you our concerns other than an email? Is there another meeting that could be attended, or are your meetings that you hold for public to attend?
Thanks, Rami. Yeah, I did get your letter. I'm sorry I haven't responded to it yet. I think you initially had maybe the wrong email address, so I got it like maybe a day late, but there will be a lot more public events once we actually have a draft network map. But I absolutely plan on responding to your letter as well. Apologies for being delayed in that.
Wonderful, thank you. And then just so you know that we do have a group, it's called Stoneham Transportation Advisory Committee here in Stoneham, and we meet once a month, and we would welcome any member of your board to come and hear us out or have a conversation with us. So thank you.
Thank you very much. So I'll remind everyone, this is just for elected officials and staff, and I will recognize Paul Schlichtman. I will unmute you.
Good evening, and thank you for the meeting. A comment and a more of a pushy comment. The present comment is, with the reduction of service and all our children going back to school right now, our middle and high school rely on MBTA service for getting kids to school, and the service has been awful. And we're getting a lot of parent complaints that buses aren't showing up, and when they do, they're packed. And so I'd hope that if you have an influence with the folks who put frequency into the Mass Ave corridor, please let them know. The other thing that I'm finding to be very disconcerting at this point is that I've seen nothing with regard to revising the bus network with the arrival of the Green Line extension. And one of the bus reductions that was contemplated was the removal of the 80 bus, because half the route parallels the new Green Line extension. The other half of the route does not, and in fact serves the communities that were excluded from the Green Line when the Mystic Valley Parkway stop was excluded. And that by extending this route and making it a frequent service route, this provides another sort of equity for Arlington, because we pay 9 times the base MBTA assessment, similar to communities such as Somerville, Newton, that get far more rail service and far more service. But we're paying that same level of assessment into the MBTA, and we're not getting that service. And by coordinating a really high quality service to the Green Line extension that parallels the service levels of the Green Line, so there's really walk off the train and get onto the bus and finish your trip, would do a lot to address the equity issues, both in terms of stopping the Green Line at Tufts and in terms of the assessment levels for the town of Arlington. And so those are my comments.
Thank you, Paul. I think I will direct the response maybe to Melissa, if you're able to respond, Melissa.
Thanks for those comments. I'm hoping I can actually respond to both your comments. Right now, service in many areas has not been good. We've been dropping a lot of service this past fall. Right now, we're shorthanded by over 100 operators, and we're not able to deliver the service that we're supposed to be delivering, that we've committed to deliver every day. And for that, I apologize. So we're working on hiring. We're working on an initiative to, in the very short term, promote about 75 of our part-time employees to full-time, so that we can try to make better use of the employees that we do have on property while we're working on fixing that backlog. But I recognize on the 77 and the 32 and a number of our bus routes, we've been dropping a number of trips, and that's not the service that we try to provide. But on your second comment, we are looking as part of Bus Network Redesign at considering the future Green Line extension and how people can feed into the Green Line extension as part of this. So we don't have the final network ready to share yet, but we are absolutely looking at kind of feeding in from Arlington into the future Medford Tough Station and from a number of other locations, looking at how we can better integrate with the future Green Line, or in some cases, perhaps have multiple opportunities where maybe routes can feed both into the Green Line and the Red Line, or the Green Line and the Orange Line, to create more of a complement to our existing radial rapid transit network. So those are absolutely things that we're looking at.
Thank you, Melissa. So one thing I will just say, as an elected official, when I recognize you, if you don't mind stating your name and title, just for everyone who's in attendance tonight, I think that would also be helpful. So Andrew Sharp, I'm going to recognize you now. Oh, maybe not. Seems so good. Kenya.
Hi, my name is Kenya Beeman. I'm a Boston resident, but I'm also the Community Engagement Manager at the Boston Planning and Development Agency for the City of Boston. So I work for a city municipality. So I'm not an elected official, nor am I a staff member, but I think my comment fits very well with this. And so in the City of Boston, those of you who live there, there's an uptick in development that's happening across the city, specifically Mattapan, Dorchester, Hyde Park, Dorchester. And so a lot of the concerns that I hear in my work as the Community Engagement Manager for this agency is that there's a lot of development, fewer parking spaces, but unreliable MBTA buses that can get the added bodies to these developments to and from. And so what happens a lot of times is that folks, the residents, constituents, then require kind of one-to-one parking to these developments because people then tend to drive when they can't rely on the public transit system. And so I guess what I would love to know, or if you have been thinking about where there is upticks of development in certain areas of the city, that you're going to add more frequent buses or more buses to specific routes where there are added developments in those areas. That's all.
Yeah, I can take this question, Reagan. So thanks for your thanks for your question on development. So one of the kind of great things about the new data set that we're using, again, it really looks at like all travel in the region and not just people who are currently riding transit today. So it's actually capturing if there's kind of like new development and people are driving or walking or biking or taking transit from those places. So we are certainly looking at I think, as I mentioned in the presentation, like new or underserved locations that have experienced growth and maybe don't have great transit service today, but merit that because there's more people there. So that's something that we're definitely looking at closely through this process.
One thing I'll also add to that is one of the things we found is that a lot of the places that are seeing new development actually have considerable demand today that we're already underserving today. So I think when you'll see our map of where frequent corridors go, that a lot of those places new development is happening is exactly where we're going to be proposing more frequent bus service. There's other places where the demand today may be lower, and that's exactly why we are setting up the metrics to continue evaluating the service year after year and be able to add more service as the demand goes up in those places.
Thanks, Christoph. Thanks, Caroline. So Andrew, I know I tried to unmute you earlier and it did not work. So let me try again. And I'll just remind everyone this section of the meeting is for elected officials and their staff. And whoop, let me try one more time. Andrew, you should be good. Can you
Hi, I'm hearing you now. Sorry, guys, I'm not elected official, but just a question for you guys. I serve the disability community, and I'm so happy to see that there is a lot of discussion being done about bus services. When we talk about access, it also includes bus shelters and boarding of the bus itself. What are some of the plans? One thing we've been advocating for Martin Street bus, no shelter. For many years, no shelter. We've been asking. That's the only street in Dorchester, in Mattapan area that doesn't have bus shelters, with many schools and many elderly on that route. So hopefully you guys will consider that. Also improvement of accessing the bus, some of the sidewalk or the bus shelter areas for disability person to get their wheelchair onto the bus. Are you looking at future improvement in these bus shelter areas, these stops, various stops area on the various routes? How are that? And I'm happy to see how we're connecting the bus to the rail, because I do drive, but when my car is down, I have to take the MBTA. And trust me, it's not really that great to connect, especially when you're trying to connect from Mattapan to Dedham with that through Ruggles. So hopefully I could hear some more about what are some of the plans, future plans for improvement in terms of access to the bus, in terms of the bus shelter. And hopefully you will flag and at least give us one bus shelter at Martin Street in front of Norfolk Hardware, where there's two major schools there and no shelter when it rains and snow. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. So this project specifically is like focused on service, but we are working really closely with the folks in the system-wide accessibility office who've been looking at how we can make our bus stops more accessible, as well as like adding better kind of like street furniture. I will say, your point on improving access, right? It also includes kind of the sidewalk and biking infrastructure to actually get to the bus as well, and making the sidewalk more accessible as well. And so I think that this project has provided a really great opportunity to work with our municipal partners and talk through some of those details, how we can work together to make the whole experience more seamless and more accessible overall.
Thanks, Caroline.
I
Shana,
also
actually,
add one thing
go ahead.
too. Sorry to cut in there, but thanks for flagging. Connectivity Mattapan to Dedham. That's absolutely a connection that's difficult to make on transit today, and we'll take a look at that.
Thanks, Melissa. Shana, do you mind actually going to the next slide? Because I do want to make sure as we're having this discussion that all the relevant links are up and people have the email address for the project as well. So I see, I'm sorry, my screen just shifted on me. Counselor Bowman, I'm going to recognize you. You should be able to unmute yourself now.
Yes, thank you so much. So I am Alicia Bowman. I'm a counselor in Newton, and we have many people who work in Newton who rely on being able to take the bus into Newton, whether they work in Newton Wellesley Hospital or in our restaurants or other businesses across the way. And especially for the people who, until we're able to get our until we're able to commuter rail upgraded, that would allow people from Boston to take the commuter rail into Newton in the morning and back out on the way in the evening. Would love to see, making sure that that group of people is accounted for. Just to make sure that they're able to get here by and not have to have, I'm hearing stories of people having 2-hour commutes from Chelsea and otherwise to get into jobs in Newton, and that's problematic. I'm trying to build them housing so they can move to Newton too, so they could have a shorter commute. But until then, I think it's really critical. And then I think just keeping up the the service from, especially from our quarters, like along Washington Street and Newton Corner, and making sure that's working. And if I understood correctly, you are working on bus signal prioritization. I think that would be really sort of key. And then lastly, I hope that, and maybe I missed it, if it's still on the table, to consider doing some sort of express lane on the Pike or on Route 9 for bus service, to just make that service, faster. So those are my comments, but most critical is making sure that we are keeping in mind the people commuting from other places to Newton via the bus. Thank you.
Great, thanks for your comments.
Helps if I unmute myself. So so it looks like we have 2 more raised hands for elected officials and staff. So we'll take those. And then I know there is a lot of chat comments and questions. We will shift to doing those. So if those with their hands raised, when I recognize you, if you state your office and ask your question. So Linda Freeman. Let's try it one more time, Linda. Can you speak now? Okay, hold on one second. I'm gonna try one more time. All right.
Hi, I've been having trouble trying to unmute. In any case, I'm Linda Freeman. I'm not an elected official, I'm sorry, but I am a former BPS parent and I still advocate for our students and also for our seniors, as in our elders, and also our students with disabilities. I want you to understand that even though you may change it to like every 30 minutes for frequency, please keep in mind of our inclement weather, that when it's freezing cold, waiting a half hour out there, especially for those with disabilities, is not ideal. Especially if they're, have mobility issues, and students with disabilities who also and other students who need to get to the school on time for breakfast. And if they miss that time frame, they don't get breakfast. Okay, so that's an issue.
All
So
right.
that's what you have to keep in mind, that those mornings and afternoons when going to school and leaving school usually have to run every 15.
All right, so thank you for your comment. We will take that. And I am just going to really urge that make sure that everyone who has their hand raised is an elected official from now on. So if you are not, I would ask you to lower your hand. Okay, so I see one more person. Oh, no one else with their hand raised. So I'm going to shift right now to some of the chat questions that we've been getting. And I think I'm going to try to direct that to the appropriate MBTA staff member who can answer them. I'll say right now, I don't know that we're going to be able to get to all of the questions tonight, but we are reading all the comments, and the website and the email address is on screen right now. So there was a question very early in the meeting, Caroline, about talking about the question of electric energy and using electric buses. Is that something you can comment on right now?
So actually, we're not the project team that's working on this specifically, but we're working closely with the fleet and facilities folks who are looking at how we can integrate electrification into the system. I know that they have a few meetings probably coming up that you can find out more on the website, but I'm not the right person to to talk specifically about that.
Great. If there's a project page, we can try to drop that in the chat if it's available tonight. Okay, so there was a question about how many people we spoke to during the rider engagement work, and I'm not sure if the question is directed at all of the rider engagement work that's been done on bus issues over the past several years, but I can speak specifically to the street teams that Caroline referenced at the beginning of the meeting. I know as part of that, one of the metrics that we have is number of actual postcards that we've handed out to people that they've taken. And I know that there was approximately 3,000 that were distributed. So that's just one metric, but there were a lot of conversations that were had as in addition to that as well. So oh, sorry, go ahead, Chris. Is that Christoph?
I was going to add something to that, which is part of what we are doing with this project is we think the most meaningful feedback we'll get is when there is actually a draft map for people to look at. And we think that map will change substantially as a result of those comments. So we are gearing up for a major round of public outreach with lots of opportunities for people to weigh in next year when there is a proposal for people to respond to.
Thank you, Christoph. So there was a question about the buses through 325 and 326. I'm going to post a comment in the chat that should have a link to talk about the structure of the new structured service that hopefully should answer that question. Continuing onward. So this is a question, I think, Caroline, for you, which is a little bit more of an existential question probably about wouldn't the people who need this, the bus the most still use it even if no changes were made to the system?
Yeah, so I guess this is kind of the captive rider choice that is sometimes talked about. Yeah, so we choose to not think of things that way because we believe that we should make service better for those that ride it, and by doing that, that'll also attract more riders. But there's no reason to make service more attractive, more convenient, faster, frequent, all those things we talked about at the beginning of the presentation for folks who are currently riding the bus today, knowing that you know, they deserve better service, and then that will also help attract future riders.
Great. I know there are sort of several questions about the LBS data and the data that's being used. I know, Caroline, I think you've already sort of addressed it with one of the earlier questions about how it looks at everybody who's using the system, but I don't know if we want to provide any additional details about the LBS data.
What specific?
No, I guess the direct question is, how are you making sure to meaningfully include transit critical populations in the planning process? And I think that that's through the use of this LBS data.
Yeah, I want to be clear though that it's data and talking to people too. So the data is not everything. The data is just the best that we've had on how low income populations and communities of color travel. That's not just focused on work trips, but as Christoph was talking about earlier, with all of the public outreach we're planning, like that is equally as important to make sure that we are hearing directly from riders and from those different populations to inform this plan. So it's really, when I say it's data driven and people driven, I mean that, and we need both for this to be successful.
And I want to emphasize, because there was some questions in the chat earlier, that it's not just Charlie card data, that it is more than Charlie card data when we're talking about data.
Yeah, no, and I think this is some of the best data we've ever had for planning bus networks. And I think what's great about it is it actually picks up a lot of trips that past transit planning has tended to ignore, including, for example, non-work trips and trips that aren't headed to downtown, and in particular, trips that transit isn't serving well today. The other thing that's great about it is it also lets us understand people's overall trip patterns. And I think one of the huge advantages is, for example, low-income residents, it's not just the bus route in their neighborhood that matters to them. It's the bus route that goes to where they work. It's the bus route that goes to where they shop. And this kind of data has allowed us to look at those overall travel patterns and really understand what parts of the network are critical to different people, not just which bus runs through their neighborhood.
Thank you, Christoph. So I know this meeting was scheduled to end at 7:30, but I think because of all the interest, we're going to keep going for just a little while longer to try to get to some more questions, Caroline, if that's okay. I see there's been 2 people with their hands raised for a little bit. We'll turn to them and then go back to some of the chat questions and then maybe have to wrap up. It's been, again, a really great discussion in the chat all evening. But first, Betty, I know you've had your hand raised for a while, so I'm going to unmute you now.
Thank you very much. So my questions are actually posted in the chat, but I'll repeat them here. So I'm basically on the South Shore. I live in Quincy, and I'm from Medford, and so I've seen kind of what's available between the North Shore, north of Boston, and the south of Boston in terms of roads and alternative modes of transportation, and how cycling and bus usage are incentivized versus not being incentivized. So here in Quincy, we have a lot of environmental justice neighborhoods. There was actually a candidates forum for city council members who were seeking election or re-election, where we discussed these neighborhoods that are kind of at risk of harm from climate change. And these are neighborhoods that have bus service as well. And I was wondering if there's been, I guess my question is 2 parts. Like, one, is there any outreach to the city officials in Quincy, Weymouth, and other South Shore cities with regards to, for example, setting up bus lanes or kind of redeveloping streets to promote alternative modes of transportation, to promote bus usage? There was mention of outreach to cities, but I think a lot of them are north of Boston. And then the other question is, what outreach has been done to our EJ communities here in Quincy? We do have a lot of folks who are people of color, English as a second language speaker, recent immigrants, low income folks. And I think it would be really helpful for them to have meetings that are in their languages, in Cantonese, Mandarin, and Vietnamese. So those are the 2 major questions that I've had. Basically, what has been done to work with city officials down the South Shore to promote bus usage, and what outreach has been done to our to folks throughout the city, but specifically to our EJ communities.
Thank you.
Yeah, I can answer that, Reagan. So your first question, municipal officials, we actually have done outreach to South Shore officials specifically, or municipal staff rather, specifically in Quincy. We had a great meeting with some of the planning staff over there to talk about ways we can work together to implement some transit priority treatments. So we have been we've had a number of meetings with different municipal staff, and I see Matt Moran has his hand up. So he's one of those multiple meetings that we've had talking through kind of how we can work together to implement this kind of shared vision for bus service in the region. Your second point, an outreach in Quincy is a really important one. And what's been great is we've actually been growing our community liaison team that Michaela is on. And we have one representative from there who actually lives in Quincy and speaks Chinese. And she's been a real asset in helping us to do outreach to local community organizations there, and has really amped up our ability to engage with residents there.
Thanks, Caroline. I'll recognize Ralph DeChico from Revere.
Hi, thank you. My name is Ralph DeChico. I run the Revere Commission on Disabilities here in Revere, and I'm also an active member of CODA, which is the Commission on Disabilities alliance of different Commission on Disabilities throughout Eastern Massachusetts. A couple of questions that I had that are basically geared towards the poll questions that were there in relationships to the outreach that has been done with people with disabilities, not only people with able-bodied abilities. Have they been brought to the table for discussions on this? Because a lot of these poll questions are geared to people with all abilities and not being taken into account, no fault of anyone, when it comes to transfers from one bus to another. And also sometimes there's going to be a wait for that. Getting on and off of the bus does cause problems for people with disabilities. Also, sometimes when there is a transfer, the distance in between the locations of the stops, and also the distance of moving some stops from different locations because of changing the routes. I know they think a quarter of a mile is not a great distance, but not only people with disabilities, but seniors do have issues with that in perfect weather, let alone when it's inclement weather. So I'm not sure. I know you do have these public bus network redesigns, but I really think that there should be something geared to towards the MOD or towards Commission on Disabilities or the ADA to bring them to the table to get a full parameter. Along with, I'm also involved with the EJ residents of the Revere neighborhood too. So that's another group that really needs to be brought to the table.
Yeah, thanks for that, Ralph. And actually, I would definitely encourage you to get in touch with us through our Better Bus Project email, because we're basically always looking for community organizations that specifically represent underserved populations that we can engage with and have the conversation with. For our survey outreach, we worked closely with the Mass Senior Action Council to help us do outreach directly to kind of their database of members. We also worked with our system-wide accessibility office that has a lot of different connections to different disability commissions and different kind of like listservs that they have to kind of get the word out. But we're always looking for new kind of organizations and people that we should be connecting with to kind of engage different people. So I definitely would support you, like sending us an email if you have some other thoughts of different organizations that we should be talking to. We always love to hear that.
So Caroline, in the interest of time, I sort of think there's a way to bucket some of the questions in the chat. And I'm wondering specifically on the topics of reliability, there were a lot of questions, and off-peak service. I don't know if we want to treat them separately. I see Matt still has his hand up. Maybe we can address some reliability, the off-peak service, have Matt from the city give his comment, and maybe then sort of conclude the meeting since I know we are over. Will that work for you?
Sure. And I appreciate how active the chat and discussion has been. I think that's one of the upsides of doing these virtual meetings is more people tend to have discussion. Yeah, so I know I didn't get to look at all the comments, but I did see just a lot of general comments and questions about how we're going to address reliability issues and the need to provide more kind of like off-peak service. So on reliability specifically, this kind of goes back to what I was talking about earlier with our municipal partners. That transit priority treatments are going to be really, really critical, especially for areas where we want to see higher frequency service. And not even just frequency, but again, reliability. And so I think that's something we've actually started those conversations now to really initiate how we can work together to have both a frequent and reliable network. So that's something that we're currently working on. As far as off-peak service, I mean, this is like another benefit of using the data set we're using. It really has underscored travel throughout the day, especially early morning, later in the evening, and in the midday. And so that's something that we're definitely looking at more closely, and also of course like weekend service as well. So that's definitely something we're looking at and working through to figure out how we can address that through the bus network redesign.
Thank you. So Matt, I will actually unmute you and let you be the last question or comment of the evening.
Great, thanks Reagan. Thanks Caroline. I just wanted to start by saying, really appreciate all the hard work you guys are doing and really appreciate the partnership. My name is Matt Moran. I work for the Boston Transportation Department, and we've been coordinating closely with Boston City agencies, Disabilities Commission, BPDA, Public Works Department. And I just wanted to say a few things real quick. I think we really appreciate the attention to equity, the attention to serving underserved, traditionally underserved communities through this process. I think we appreciate the engagement and the transparent process that you guys have led. And I'm sure we'll continue to lead. A few quick things. The first thing is, I think, and I know you've sort of alluded to this, I think we need to take a long-term look at sort of the bus network, and that is everything from what is going to be needed, obviously not just next year, but sort of going forward into the future. Where are there high growth areas, as my colleague Kenya alluded to? Where are there areas that are that are planned to experience a lot of growth, and understand what those impacts are going to be into the future. I also want to say, I think from the BTD side, we don't want to see this as a sort of zero-sum process where if you subtract services from one area for the benefit of the other. I think we need to think about this in terms of growing the fleet, growing the system, and giving people a plan for what that looks like. Because as has been alluded to, I think if we're asking people to, if we're asking for people to give up something, especially around transit, that's inevitably going to lead to a potentially less equitable and less efficient system. And then the third thing, and Melissa alluded to this as well, is the need for infrastructure. I think it would be great for this plan to have a complementary infrastructure package to go along with it, knowing that the investment needed will be substantial. We really want this to succeed, and we think that the infrastructure is a critical part of that. So all that being said, again, thank you for your time. Thank you for your consideration. And have a great night.
Thanks, Matt. And I want to echo Caroline's comments about what a great chat and discussion that's been going on tonight. I'm sorry we have not had a chance to get to all of the questions. I will just reiterate that the project website link is up on screen. For those of you who are not on our mailing list who are here tonight, you can sign up for updates, and the project inbox, if you have an email question you'd like to send us, is there as well. And I think Amanda will be sharing that in the chat. But Caroline, I will now turn it back to you for the conclusion of the meeting.
Yeah, no, thank you everyone for joining us. It's been a great discussion, and again, it was really exciting, especially the past month, to not only help promote this meeting, but to talk to riders again. And we're looking forward to doing more in-person meetings, but also helpful to know that we can get a lot of folks to join us and have discussion, especially during these bad weather times, to utilize this platform for that. So we really appreciate the engagement tonight, and looking forward to continuing the discussion on this project. So thanks again to everyone, and have a good rest of your night.